I think that agility, that ability to deliver, we've done effectively 4 car programs in 6 years. I'm a recovering petrol head, so I've always loved cars. We have 5.2 billion data points on that car, which is billion, which is quite a lot. What I would say is we also turn people down. And then look, you'll always get the haters. We're very open that this isn't for everybody. Zero marketing in B2B, and yet we've now got nearly $500 million worth of opportunity in our B2B. $500 million worth of opportunity in our B2B market. You've got to have self-belief, because actually there are days when this is really, really hard. That's what worries me now, is that there are some really cool European brands that won't make it.
Justin, welcome to What It Takes. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
No, a pleasure. I mean, this is going to be a very interesting conversation for sure. You've been building something very special in a very busy market, so we're gonna dive a lot into that. But firstly, how are things? How's the start of the year been?
Very good. Very, very good. Thank you. Very exciting. Strange things happening in the world. Bizarrely, that are creating some opportunities for us, because I think the move towards EV had a bit of an up and down. But actually, I think the EV winter is actually starting to fade, and the EV spring is coming back again. So that's an interesting place to be.
Well, look, we're going to talk a lot about Everrati and the business you've been building since 2019 or so.
That's right. Yeah.
But before that, you've had a sort of 30-year career in many different elements of fintech and technology and business as well. Can you just give me an insight as to what those 30 years really look like?
Yeah, so I started my career in tech, but as a business development, sales, marketing, that kind of thing. So, which is what I loved. I joke, but I look at my son and in fact my daughter, and they can talk to anybody. They love just being out there, and I think I probably that was where I was when I was their age, I guess. And started there. Always wanted to do my own thing, but never really could see what that thing should be. And I guess what I did was I used the fact that I was at places like Hewlett Packard, SAP, fantastic sales training background, and then went out on kind of my own, but with a very, very good friend of mine in 2006, which is really when I started my first business.
Yeah, that leap to start your first business in 2026. Sorry,
yeah,
2006 is what I was going for.
Yes.
What was that experience like for you? Different to it is now?
Yeah, it's funny. It was something I always wanted to do. It's obviously, it's quite a risk. I already had, some responsibilities. And I suppose, but at the same time, it was one of the things, if I don't do it now, I never will. So that was kind of something that I just had to do.
Yeah.
And I suppose back then as well, you think you can do anything, and still think you can do anything, quite frankly. So it's not, you have to have that level of confidence for obvious reasons. But it was exciting, and honestly, the world changed pretty quickly, because we were in a financial services business. 2008 happened, so that was awkward.
Business, interesting.
So we pivoted, and we made it through, and actually made a business out of it that was hugely successful.
And you ran that business for how long?
That was around 10 years. Yeah, that was around 10 years.
With a partner?
10, 11 years, exactly. 10 or 11 years with a partner. That's we kind of started on one thing, again pivoted, which you have to do in business. You've got this grand plan, and then all of a sudden you kind of think, okay, what can I do to modify that plan? Built that into an FCA regulated payments business, which was then sold to a private equity business. So that was great. Did some other things in the interim, but always loved doing small, exciting new businesses. I'm probably entirely unemployable, quite frankly, at this point in time. But that's fine. I've had a great career.
And selling a business, that must have been an interesting experience, particularly the first one you started.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was that like?
Yeah, look, we were. I'll be honest, we were fortunate. We got a tap on the door one day from somebody that was interested. And it's a long process. It was a very, very long process, especially because it was a regulated business. So that was I think it took over a year, and then there was kind of a sort of an earn out type process as well. I recall very vividly sitting in a big London law firm, and you could see genuinely like a sea of paperwork on both sides of the table for the legals for this thing. But again, learning experience. You don't think you're going to be in these positions when you start, but it was a great outcome.
And you had a business partner then. You have a business partner now?
Yes. So I have a business partner who's my co-CEO.
Nice.
He is fantastic. So I actually bizarrely met him during my time in my previous business. So he was actually a client of my previous business. He was our main client. So we got to work together
Yeah.
pretty closely.
Yeah.
Entirely different to me. He is super focused in terms of diligence around staff members and kind of process. I'm far more. I just need to open doors and get things done. And it actually works very well as a partnership. He's ex-military, so again, very focused on the job in hand.
Yeah.
Thankfully, brings me back to reality sometimes, which is what I need. But yeah, so it works very well. And I think there's some people that entirely build businesses on their own. But it's all about a group of people, and I don't think it's ever truly on your own from that perspective.
Yeah. Do you think there is a kind of key lesson in being a great business partner, maybe from the first business? I mean, you started a business together and sold it after 10 years by my calculations. And then you sold it very successfully. Is there a secret to getting that dynamic right?
There really is, yeah, and it can go very wrong, obviously, as well. So I think it's more about knowing your own strengths, and therefore, if you can find somebody that also covers off your weaknesses at the same time, and you can collaborate. The problem is you'll never really know that until you get into hot water. But where it works, then it's a really positive thing, as you can imagine.
No, definitely. So you decided to start Everrati at some stage.
Yes.
Where did this initial idea come from?
So I am I'm a recovering petrol head. So I've always loved cars. My mother, bless her, who unfortunately not very well, so she can't talk about this anymore. But she always said, your first word was car. As a a few years old. I was constantly playing with toy cars. I was constantly looking at cars. I was the kid in the back of my parents' car on a dark night saying which car was coming towards us just from their headlights. I was entirely obsessed. So given the opportunity when I'd sold a business, and by the way, during that journey, I spent far too much money on cars and various toys. But actually, a couple of things happened actually. So I was sitting around, thinking about what I should do next.
Yeah.
I had my daughter, who was then 7, had genuinely started worrying about the earth flooding, climate change.
She had,
right. Which is a parent to a 7-year-old is kind of worrying. And then the other thing that happened, which is I guess the real thing that really kicked me off, was Harry and Meghan. So Prince Harry and Meghan drove away from Windsor Castle in an E-Type that had been changed to an EV. So it was a one-off EV electric E-Type. So I saw that and thought, that's a brilliant idea. I started doing the research around that. My view was, I love beautiful cars. At the time, there wasn't so beautiful EVs, and arguably there aren't too many even now. So driving that passion into true car passion into an EV market space wasn't happening, and arguably still hasn't happened. So it's just kind of taking a view that actually you can take what's already there, bring it into the future, bring it to a market and an audience that potentially has never had the opportunity to experience those beautiful shapes, those beautiful designs. So that was kind of the thesis, and we are now in a place where that's kind of starting to work out, which is great.
Was there ever an idea to build cars from scratch?
Yes, and I think I would say never. We're getting some really interesting opportunities now where, on my team, I have people who have done exactly that. They've been technical director for a supercar company. They've done full vehicle builds for an OEM. I think the great thing about technology and advancements in technology is that there's actually becoming a place now where you can start to think about doing that at a price point that is significantly less than the 50 million that it would have cost you to do before. And actually, therefore, we are looking at a few programs with partners where we will be the powertrain of choice for some really cool stuff that's coming through. And actually, we're not too far away from being able to do it. Whether we do it is another matter, or do we just support others in doing it?
And is that more of a strategic thing for the business?
It is, absolutely.
Make sure you get that right. Totally. And when you're day one on a business like this, because I've started business before, they're mostly service-based businesses and some brands. So there's an element of like, get a few products, or start with one service, or get your first client, whatever that process normally is. I'm trying to get in my head what your day one or week one looks like for starting a business like this. Can you give me an insight?
It was interesting, not least because bear in mind this is 2019, right? So did some research, started thinking about what's being honest, what's the quickest and most efficient way of getting a first car developed? And in the same way, let's be honest, as Tesla took an existing chassis from Lotus and created that into an EV, which was the original Tesla Roadster, and various other businesses in the past. It's take what's already there and how can you create something out of that existing vehicle. And of course, the poster car for me at the time, certainly when I was a kid, was a wide body 911. So I was thinking, okay, how might we create something around that? Started looking at partnerships, who's got some of this technology. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, which was interesting. So, and I worked out I needed a much bigger team than I kind of had first pictured. I thought, oh no, we'll do this just with partnerships. And actually,
like you and partnerships, basically.
Yeah. But you need a head of engineering. You need, EV. You need kind of high-end EV technicians. You need mechanical engineering guys. You need a full team. So the crazy thing was that I put some things out on LinkedIn, and I'm a bit of a LinkedIn fiend, as I think you've already seen. But actually, all of a sudden, I started getting people coming to me saying, "Oh, I love what you're doing," and they'd seen the website and all this sort of stuff. So all of a sudden, I'm getting engineers from Lotus, McLaren, JLR approaching us and saying, we'd love to come on board, which is wonderful.
Is this a concept stage, sorry? So you hadn't built anything at this point. Is that just your vision?
It was concept. We'd built a website. It was really just vaporware, quite frankly, at that point. It was a dream. So that was really fantastic because these people were being let go by the big OEMs and they wanted to get involved in something different. Secondly, it meant being blind. We didn't have to pay any recruitment fees. The crazy thing was when we eventually met them, because remember, we were doing all this on Teams, because at the time you weren't really supposed to be meeting for anything other, that wasn't super important. 2 or 3 of them are over 6'3", which doesn't sound bad, but when you're trying to build kind of fairly compact classic cars into EVs, great story. One of our cars, which is the GT40, they have to take the entire seats out and sit in it to even do the testing because they couldn't fit in them. So those kind of stories, will stay with you forever. But that's kind of what starting a business is all about.
Sure. What were you looking for when you're starting to build a team? Because for you, I imagine building your previous business is financial literacy. It's it's a level of understanding. When you're building a brand like Everrati in the early stages, what are the key attributes you're looking for?
Do you know, it's all about attitude. It's all about, yes, of course, experience in McLaren is a fantastic tick in the box. But actually, more than anything, it's that kind of go-getting, hungry, we can get something done. Because there's a lot of individuals that would love on paper to do a startup, but actually, as I'm sure you know, you have to be wearing 30 different hats at the same time and working through, whether it's marketing, payroll, whether it's working out why that something's not working, switching on. You have to have that attitude that it's can-do attitude, and I'll get it done. You don't have a big team around you, so I think that as much as anything is the most important thing. Of course, what they've done in the past is hugely important, and that's kind of bizarrely that's the hygiene factor for me. But actually, it's more about the individual and what their attitude is. And for a couple of our guys genuinely have been there from the very beginning.
Really?
We were out with them yesterday evening. And the crazy thing is, they've come from fairly big OEMs or very exciting businesses like McLaren. But of course, at one of these companies, they might have only been responsible for a very small part of an overall vehicle program. With us, it's everything from inception of an idea right through to, frankly, showing it at Salon Privé or Monterey Car Week or wherever it might be, and actually taking it out with the client. And you're getting a full end-to-end view of the industry.
That's amazing. How are you communicating your vision in those maybe in year one, I guess? I don't know how long it took you to actually get your first production car. Was it?
It was actually about 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, so in that time where there isn't a thing, right? How were you communicating your vision, your ideas? Because that must be quite challenging.
I think, again, it's, the reality is, the great thing is you're talking to people who are kind of already converted. They love the idea. We are, if you look at what we're doing, we're creating EVs out of cars people already love.
Yes.
So they already love the 911. They might already love the Land Rover or whatever else it might be that we're doing. So you're kind of always talking to people that want you to win. They want to be part of it. So actually, once they get that simple vision, which is we're going to create the coolest EVs on the planet, if you're a car guy or girl, that's not a bad thing to be involved in. So I think that from that perspective, that's day one. I think also if you're in that industry anyway, you want something that's more exciting, that you can put your own stamp on as well as an employee. All of our employees are shareholders, so actually it's a family thing, and that's not suited everybody. If you've been in a big corporate, for example, being in that situation where there is nobody else to ask for kind of advice, it's down to you, can be quite daunting.
No, definitely.
But some people absolutely love it. So and I think that's a key thing.
Nerding out on cars all day would be great.
Right, exactly.
In the first 2 years to build your first model, what was the most challenging part of those 2 years?
So it was probably a combination of things. Circumstance, COVID didn't help, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Access to capital is always challenging. I mean, I funded all of the beginning of the business, but you suddenly realise you need quite a few more £1 million than you first anticipated. So finding that is always a challenge. Again, genuinely dealing with investors over Teams and Zoom as opposed to meeting them is always, it's not ideal, quite frankly.
Do you mind me asking how much cash you really needed in those first?
So we didn't realise how much we needed. We thought we'd get it done for about £1 million or so, and it turned out to be quite substantially more than that.
Right.
But having said that, it's still under 10, which is, when you consider what we've achieved, is pretty incredible actually. And so we're very asset light. We utilize the partnerships in a big way, which we can talk through. But so I suppose so that was clearly a challenge. And then look, you'll always get the haters. And we're very open that this isn't for everybody, right? This is it's our whole ethos is essentially taking cars that were loved.
Yeah.
We're very careful on Porsche. Most of the cars we start with, they happen to be low mileage because they're unloved. They're not low mileage because they're special. So it will be a Tiptronic narrow body 964 that's been left in a shed somewhere. It's not a turbo bodied, masterpiece or an RS. So we start with a blank canvas that is not the prettiest, and create it into something beautiful. And I think that when people get their head around that, which is this car was never enjoyed anyway, it's less of an issue than people assuming we're doing it to a halo car of some description.
The haters part, was that pretty intense in the first couple of years?
It wasn't intense, but it was just funny. You got guys who just don't get it, and that's fine. Not everybody gets it. Not everybody gets everything, and we have to be mindful of that. So, very early days, 2021 really, which is when we first started taking cars to things like, again, Salon Privé, Concours of Elegance, things like that. There were those who were, it was probably 25% of people that came to see us said, how dare you, what have you done, kind of thing.
Really?
Now it's less than 5%, because people have actually realized that we're not doing this for any kind of terrible reason. We're doing it because actually we think these cars deserve to be on the road and enjoyed and seen, and, they're rolling art. If you look at some of these beautiful shapes like the 911, the Pagoda, GT40, these are cars that have a place in history as icons. And if we're not careful, they will just be in history. And actually, we can get them out on the road and enjoy. That's right.
When the first car was done, what was the feeling?
It was brilliant. Yeah. So
do you remember it well?
No, very, very well. So there's two things actually. What I would say is that we actually built two first cars. So we actually had a kind of a rolling. Good from far, but far from good looking Porsche 911 Targa, which we put the kind of bill of materials in. We were testing it. It just wrapped. I mean, it was pretty flaky underneath. And I'll never forget. So I live in Surrey, and you probably know the A30. Very, very. There's some great roads in that area, but there's a very, very straight road that goes through Sunningdale and Virginia Water, and I pulled up at some lights and an Audi R8 V10 was next to me. I thought this would be funny. So I literally, floored it as you do. And I lost him. And in Sunningdale, he flashed me and pulled me over. He said, what have you done to that car? And we got chatting about that at that point in time. So that was our kind of prototype running. No one really knew it was an EV, but it was fun. It was very engaging. And then the very first kind of, client ready, or at least client looking ready, was a candy apple red 964 wide body that we launched at Joe Macari just down the road actually, in sort of second half of 2021, and that was brilliant. So again, it was still COVID time. So the bizarre thing was that most journalists weren't traveling, and a lot of really good motoring journalists are British, right? They're based here in the UK. So thanks to our PR team, we managed to get quite a few journalists to come down and see us. Gordon Ramsay came down to see us. There was a load of people in and around Joe Macari. So all of a sudden, we created this buzz, which was fantastic for, let's be honest, a company that had zero marketing budget. We just built this car and wanted to show it. So that was fantastic. But not only that, people started writing about it, and then all of a sudden we started getting US press writing about us, and that just was that was a snowball from there.
And that car, was that built on your spec of what that wasn't made for a customer?
No, so it was our development car that we'd kind of started. Interestingly, that car is currently in California as a demo car. So it's a UK demo, but it's a roving demo. That's probably done 25,000 miles as an EV. 5,000 of those probably sideways, and Michelin are very, very happy with us because we get a lot of tires. But that just shows, again, these are not just toys to be kind of looked at. They can actually be very much used and enjoyed.
Yeah. So by that point, the brand or business isn't making any cash.
No,
right?
Right.
So was that the launch pad for speaking with clients and finding clients?
Absolutely.
Did you have an idea of who, when you're kind of building the brand, and as you're selecting a certain car and a certain market, and EV is its own market in a way.
That's right.
Did you kind of have a good idea of who would be the end consumer of the product?
We thought we did.
Okay.
Yeah. And it turned out to be partially right. So
who did you think it was going to be?
So we thought that, you'd get car collectors that have, say, got a 964 in their collection. They don't really want to drive it. Why don't we create almost a carbon copy for you as an EV? You get to use this every day. And by the way, I've got an RS in the garage kind of thing. To a point, that's been true. So we've got a couple of those. More... The bigger piece that we have is, I guess, and it's an overused term, but we kind of have kind of thought leaders that are people that love design, they love technology, they love, the sort of a certain part of the car, whether it is from a design perspective, whether it's its history, whether it's the designer themselves. But then actually, they have an eye on sustainability, and they want to be as, conscious and, conscious as they possibly can. They may, by the way, still fly private, and there's that whole yin and yang balance. But actually, I'd say 90% of our clients have never driven or owned the original of what we end up building for them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's somebody that loves the look of a 911
Yeah.
or loves the look of a Pagoda,
Yeah.
always promised themselves one, but they're not really car people.
Right.
So they are, they might be professional sports people.
Yeah.
They might be film directors in Hollywood. They might be tech billionaires. We've got a really eclectic mix of incredible clients. They might be a Middle Eastern prince. We've got all these incredible people that just love the look and the design of something, which is why we say it's rolling art, because it's a beautiful kind of piece of iconic history, but they want to be able to use it either every day or on a regular basis, and they're not the sort of people that you get in it and it lets them down when they've driven it to lunch, and that might well happen, with some of the classic cars as original. All of a sudden, no, they know it's going to work. So it's kind of really interesting from that perspective that we assumed one thing. That is to a point true, but actually more we've got, which is the really interesting thing about us as a business, which we're not just focused on your car guys and girls. It's actually a very, very broad cross section.
And probably broader than people think it will be for them as well.
Absolutely right.
And up until that sort of point, so year 2, year 3, it feels like you are a business purely built off out of innovation, right?
Yeah.
Innovation is expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, in terms of that initial plan, you could obviously have innovated even more, right? But that would have cost something. So how did you know the kind of stopgap for innovation? So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think, look, as a business person, you have to know when it's ready enough.
Yeah.
The problem is that nothing will ever be absolutely 100% perfect. There'll always be elements you need to evolve. But from a business perspective, you need to have income, and you need to have early clients that are prepared to work with you on that, and being open with them and say, look, this is a Gen 1, and we will update it to Gen 2 when we can, but actually work with us on this. So we've got some great early adopter clients, one of which is a very incredible tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. he was incredible. So out of that first piece of PR that we did in London, we just get this email one day from this gentleman who turns out, they'd sold a business to Google for $3 billion recently. And he ordered a car, and entirely, again, hadn't met us, hadn't seen a car, read some PR. He was our first US client. But my point is that if you always wait, especially in this industry, if you always wait for perfection, you probably never get there. And I think that's the reality of tech generally. There'll be a beta program, there'll be various different iterations. So as long as it's safe and as long as it's as reliable as it can be, that's kind of what you have to live with. It's different if you're doing, there's different industries where it's easier to get perfection, right? But the reality is, as a business person, you have to be realistic about what's enough, and can we then improve upon it once we've got that.
Yeah. And the partnerships element of starting out, I imagine that sped up innovation,
yes,
but also decreased risk, right?
Yeah.
Is that really kind of key to be
honestly, we have been so fortunate to have the partners that we have. So, one of the partnerships we have is a electric motor company. Right. They normally only supply, the likes of Lotus or McLaren or Aston Martin. Due to our network of our engineers, we were able to secure them as a partner for our e-motors. So they are the most power dense and some of the best e-motors in the world.
Yeah.
Similarly, the inverters we use, which is how you get the power between the motor and the battery in a safe way. Silicon carbon inverters. Again, there's nowhere on the planet most people even access to these. We have them as a partner. Battery system. So we're very fortunate that we have best in class technology components and elements. What's really then key is our software. So our software that manages all of this and actually controls the powertrain. That's how we've been able to grow as quickly as we have so far.
And I'm going to make an assumption about your industry that it can be quite tough in the sense of people being like, oh no, they're too small, or
yes,
oh no, they're not serious enough, etc.
Yeah.
And that must be similar in other industries as well. How did you get past that? How do you go about that?
Again, I guess it's circumstance insofar as that's what I had in my last business as well. So it was the business I had previously was an electronic money business. So it was a UK regulated business. It was one level below a retail bank in terms of regulation. But because there was so much innovation in that space, the little players were winning. They were the ones that were winning because they could be far more agile, quick to market than let's say a bank. And that's proven true. And now the fintech industry, has been massive over the last 15, 20 years. Because
Revolut,
that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And let's be honest, the early days of PayPal and Elon Musk, there are some synergies there. So I think the automotive space has been guilty of that as well, right? You had to be huge to make anything work. And actually, technology has evolved to the point now where small players actually can make a huge difference.
Right.
And I think that agility, that ability to deliver, we've done effectively 4 car programs in 6 years. Now,
crazy.
That would not be a normal thing. Now, don't get me wrong, we have an OEM light approach, so we're not testing, to the nth degree in the Arctic Circle. We're not taking cars to South Africa to go and test them in the heat, but we do things in a way that's safe, reliable, and to OEM standards, but we do it in a very much kind of shorter time period. And that is fantastic because it means we can get cars to market and happy clients, but it also means that we've been approached by a load of other companies wishing to also build cars, and that's kind of where our business is going now. So we're continuing to build some incredible cars for our kind of direct clients, so our B2C clients, but on the other side of that, we now have a significant opportunity, developing powertrains for other people as well.
Insane. What did the OEMs think of it when it first happened? What did Porsche think of it?
Really interesting. So I think you make your own luck, but we're so respectful to, let's say, the Porsche. We do not. We try and make it look as correct as possible, as good as possible. I'm sure you know that Singer had some challenges with Porsche, and people were calling it a Singer Porsche. We're not an Everrati Porsche. It's a Porsche it's redefined by Everrati in terms of, the work that we do.
Right.
We had a couple of really interesting, again, luck in the early days. So I mentioned Michelin earlier. We had a partnership with Michelin. We still do. They were, and I think this might have been 22, or maybe 21, 22. Michelin had offered us a place in their supercar paddock at Goodwood, Goodwood Preston Speed. So they had 4 kind of vehicle spaces, and they were talking to us about being one of them. And
Such a huge moment for such a young brand.
Yeah, for us, it's absolutely incredible. So we kind of started planning this, and then somebody said, "Are Porsche okay with this?" Because actually, Porsche are the main sponsor of Speed at that point in time. I think that's they are. Anyway, so they made some calls, and Porsche said, "Absolutely no, we love what they do." So that was a starting point. We were then at Monterey Car Week in 2023. So we had a really cool sort of stand there and whatever. And the head of Porsche Classic came up to us and said, again, looking around our car, love what you guys do. So we've been very fortunate that, again, because of the way we approach it, we're very respectful to the original brand. The way we do business is actually the client brings the donor. Now, we may help the client buy the donor,
right?
But the work we do to that is it's actually their car when we start the work. So again, as I'm sure you know, if it's your car, you can do whatever you like with it. We don't sell a finished Porsche 911 EV. We do the work to a car that happens to be in their name. So that kind of is a slightly different, slightly different technical process, should we say?
Yeah. And do you think there's a point where, I know you're thinking about other brands, do you think there's a point where brands will start to not like it? Is there a way that, obviously you're saying it's about being respectful, right?
Yeah.
But again, with what some of your customers want, they probably want some interesting things in a sense. So is there a way that you think you would approach that if you maybe think you're pushing it too far?
Yeah, look, I think the reality is, again, we want to be known to be doing the right thing, and the right thing is being respectful to what was there before. And let's be honest, having the ability to use that car in a city that's zero emissions, having the ability to use that vehicle in places that wouldn't normally see them around. So I think from that perspective, you remember, there was, I think, 65,000 964s built. So we're doing a very, very small percentage. I mean, given there's 80% of all Porsches are still on the road, we're taking a fairly small percentage. Yeah. What I would say is we also turn people down. So we we had a Middle Eastern client who wanted to create a Porsche 959 as an EV. And we politely declined because that's too special. Don't be wrong, if you can find a burnt out, shell, we'll gladly look at it, but that was kind of a step too far. So again, it's about being respectful.
Probably the best way to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Longevity of the brand as well.
That's right.
So after your PR moment in London, 3 years in, how much of a springboard did that give you in terms of, is that the moment where the business became something?
That's right. It really was. And, I think, so that was, again, you make your own luck, but that was very, very fortunate, quite frankly. It also meant that we, again, had some, so given that we're a fairly small UK company, almost 70% of our clients are in the US, which is kind of crazy. So that moment gave us, global, or certainly international kind of coverage. So that really was the springboard. I think I mentioned before, a guy called Matt Rogers, which is our first US client, who came to us, and again, it was during COVID, so we couldn't see him, he couldn't see us. He commissioned a car, and the very, very first time that we could fly to the US, I got on a plane, went to see him in Marin County, and sat down with him and said, "Look, Matt, what, if you don't mind me asking, we love that you've kind of done this with us, but why?" And his open comment was, "Look, he's a very, so his business had been in sustainability. So he was one of the co-founders of Nest, which is the home energy saving device. And he said, look, Justin, I grew up in the back of my dad's 964. Me and my brothers, our fondest moments, being in the back of my father's car. But he said, and because of his views on sustainability, clean energy, he actually had when I saw him, I think it was day 3, he'd had the very first Lucid on the road. So Lucid was parked outside and we were chatting outside this coffee shop. But he said, that he'd always promised himself a 964, but he'd never drive one if it wasn't electric, which is kind of the mentality of some of the clients that we deal with,
Right.
which is they're not, these aren't necessarily petrol heads that are going electric. Some of them are, but others are just, they have an absolute love of a certain type of car and their belief system, and they want to drive something that's zero emissions, and therefore we're offering them something very, very different than they get elsewhere, as you can imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So at that point, are you starting to get a lot of inbound, a lot of requests?
Yes, absolutely.
Was the business ready for that?
It was just about ready. I mean, I think, you never turn these things down.
Yeah,
obviously. So we started getting inquiries. So the choice of vehicles that we did, as I said before, so we started with the 964. Very early, however, we also chose to do the Land Rover, so the Land Rover series. So we now do Land Rover series 2s and 3s. Very deliberately not the Defender. I think, Defender's been done. If we're going to do a Defender, which we will, it'll be a more elevated vehicle. But we started also developing that at the same time. So actually we could start to talk to clients that weren't quite ready at Porsche level, but actually loved the idea of a kind of a beach runner or something to use in the mountains. So we've now got those. Good grief, we've had Land Rovers now in Switzerland, obviously the UK, Holland, Palm Beach, Florida, the Hamptons, Boston. So we've got a set that people like Land Rovers, and that's been great. And again, such an iconic car. They're not long distance EVs, but neither was the original, quite frankly.
No, I have one. Definitely not.
It's I always joke that if you're doing more than 50 miles in one, you need a chiropractor anyway. So you're not, that kind of puts you off.
Yeah.
So that was great. And again, we got some early clients on there. And in fact, early clients on there actually were some of my kind of friends and kind of colleagues from my previous industry. So again,
Nice.
They were great first clients and very, very supportive. So again, it's just using your network and creating those connectivity pieces. But yeah, I mean, so that was the other, I guess what I would say is we were kind of almost, we were developing that vehicle whilst we were developing the Porsche. Just so happens the Porsche hit the road first.
Yeah,
actually.
When success is happening, which it sounds like it was at that stage, growing is painful and expensive. Did that feel like it at the time, or was it just like, this is working? No.
It's all, look, from the outside, you have to look like the swan, but underneath, you're really, really pushing hard, as I'm sure you know. So the big thing is, I guess, we're now at a stage, we've had a couple of investment rounds, we've got some fantastic investors. It always costs more than you think, but actually the opportunity is way bigger than we ever thought as well. So we're in a fortunate position now where the B2C business actually, with the following wind this year, will be cash flow positive, which is wonderful. And then it's just about growing from there. The B2B business is embryonic, but it uses exactly the same technology. So that's more about how we go to market, how we scale. But yes, it's always hard. There's always late nights. There's always sleepless nights. But the reality is we love what we do. We're very fortunate that we're in a space that is it's exciting, and we get to play with some incredible cars.
Yeah.
We get to, I'm always astounded by the clients that we'll get an email from somebody that's a professional sports person, just completely out of the blue, which is an amazing place to be as a small company, as you can imagine.
And for you, doing at this stage, when you're going and building a business the second time very successfully, what are the kind of biggest lessons that were coming from that 10-year journey you went on? Almost 10 years, 20 years, almost now.
Absolutely.
What are the biggest lessons you took from there to make sure you got it right or improved what you were doing this time?
Yeah, I think, look, you've got to have self-belief, because actually there are days when, this is really, really hard. You have to, we talked about this before, you have to be able to pivot. If there's one thing I'd say to anybody setting up a business, it's so unusual for that one idea to be the thing that ends up being successful. So pivoting, slightly. We talked earlier that we did different vehicle types for a very good reason. Yes, we could have stuck to, let's say, the Porsche 964, but actually, that's it's a fun market, but actually adding the let's say the Mercedes-Benz Pagoda and the Land Rover meant that we were multi-mark very, very early.
Right.
The key reason for that, of course, is they're generally fairly different buyer types, but also the kind of clients we have. I mean, I was chatting to a client last week in California, and he said, "Oh, can you bring my vehicle back to the house?" And I assumed it was one of the other 3 houses he's already talked to about. No, this is the 4th house. And I think this is the point, which is the clients we have, a number of properties generally. So actually the Land Rover might be right for his one house, but actually the Porsche is right for his other house. And I think, again, we've got that ability to then, help them with those cars which is unusual. So again, being able to pivot early is really important. And what I say is, you've got to have self-belief. You've got to have supportive people around you. My dear, long-suffering wife, and people that believe in you. Because I think that, again, it can be quite a lonely thing being an entrepreneur, having that vision, but not everybody getting it, and actually doing it.
It's always a challenge. And also, I think most entrepreneurs are really bad at communicating the feelings, but also the vision sometimes to the one close to them in that element. How would you say when to pivot when it's not working?
So I would say you're constantly evolving anyway.
Right.
You're constantly trying something on the edges of what you're doing, because that, you never quite know. It might be a messaging thing from a marketing angle. It might be the publications that you're in from a PR perspective. It might be how you're telling the story. We actually last year, should I say, we created the Everrati coffee table book, which is a leather-bound, kind of 160 odd page book, the story of our business, which was kind of a real, it was a moment of a big investment, because they're not inexpensive to create. But all of a sudden, I know there's 50 to 100 meter yachts floating around the Mediterranean with our book in it, alongside, an Asseline book of Ferrari and whatever it might be. So again, having the ability to think, okay, how do we want to position ourselves as a brand? It's not just about the engineering. We're not, it sounds weird. Are we selling a car? Yes, but we're actually selling a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And again, it's all about messaging and pivoting, and all the time sort of editing and trying. And if it's not working, do something else. But not flipping entirely, just kind of editing what you're doing and refining what you're doing. And that's constant, quite frankly.
Do you think there's a time where you got that wrong, like in a big way, or is it more just been those micro adjustments?
I think it's micro adjustments, thankfully. Yeah. No, it's been micro adjustments. There are elements that you learn from, obviously, and I think there's we've had people on the team that weren't quite ready to be in a very small startup, and they've moved on. But actually, our team is pretty solid. We've had people from the beginning, and very, very few people have actually moved on. So that's been amazing.
I can imagine internally, for the way that the business operates and the product you deliver, it's probably about pushing pretty hard, pretty consistently. How are you keeping the team pushing as hard as you are?
I think a combination of shared vision, trying to make sure that you communicate as much as possible. I think also, by definition, our team all have a real passion for what they do.
Right.
They wouldn't be doing it otherwise. There's far easier ways of earning a living, quite frankly. But actually, that shared vision, shared passion, and let's be perfectly honest, there's not many sort of, at the time, 3-year-old companies that can take 4 cars to Pebble Beach and have them on show, and the world's media and kind of car people coming.
Do that?
Yeah,
have you seen that before?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's a very small number, I'm guessing. So actually being involved in something that is exciting, that has the ability to, I'm not going to say change the world, but really change people's perceptions is really exciting. And let's be honest, you're not selling photocopies, you're selling something that's beautiful, that's engaging, that's, it's a work of art, quite frankly. So I think, again, if you're into that kind of thing, which a lot of our, all of our staff are, it's easier, right?
Yeah.
They forgive a lot at that point in time.
And they understand as well, right? I guess their backgrounds must have been going through you must have had thousands of technical challenges and thousands of client challenges.
Absolutely.
But the experience kind of comes through on that.
It does. I think, again, we've been very fortunate that we have people that have genuinely built cars from a piece of paper to being a successful supercar brand. So we've got people that have got so much knowledge and so much experience, that means that not only for our own vehicles, but then when we're talking to third parties about helping them build build a car.
Yeah.
We just got some of those nuggets internally, which means that we're always adding more value than, frankly, just as an engineering company. We're already, we've got clients at the moment on the B2B side that are building a brand new brand. They've got tens of millions of investments to actually build something new. They're coming to us as this tiny company, quite frankly, saying, how would you market this? How would you promote it? What do you do at Pebble Beach? And we've done all of this stuff over the last few years.
Yeah.
So we're kind of, we're in a very, very unique position. And that, that bodes well, because it means that we're then getting more and more people approaching us to do the same. So we're, by definition, you want to talk about it and people get to know about it.
With so much opportunity around you, opportunity cost, I think, is a very interesting variable that many entrepreneurs have to think about, right? Is that I could do that thing, or I could get involved in that, or I've got a little side thing, etc. How do you stop yourself from getting distracted?
It's actually quite hard. It really is. I don't switch off really very easily. So just there's always something going on. I think I'm very fortunate. I have a business partner that is good at that piece and kind of refocusing. And by the way, things very rarely come off the list. They might just go down the priority, if that makes sense. So there's there's very rarely a bad idea. It just might be the time isn't right for that idea. So it is about trying to refocus. It's about, let's be honest, seeing what is ahead of you and what's priority number one, and gradually kind of going down that list and ticking the ones off the wolf closest to the door, or the biggest opportunity, quite frankly. We're constantly talking to, whether it's journalists, new clients, investors, you have to switch quite quickly in some of these conversations. But actually, because the product is so cool and engaging and fun, it just, it's not, I don't think there's many people, my friends, will see me on, whether it's being on LinkedIn or Insta, and I'm on Pacific Coast Highway driving a really cool car again. It's not really work when it comes to that. I'm driving down, Mulholland Drive in a Pagoda, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I get it.
But what we've done with that is create a lifestyle and brand that people are, is resonating very, very well. So, and that's, by the way, it doesn't come by accident, but we have done it kind of in a way that, I'm really pleased with, the way it's gone and the result.
Competition. People are starting to look at what you're doing. In the last couple of years, it's obviously exploded and expanded so much, and it doesn't look like that's slowing down anytime soon. How do you look at competition?
So I would say, from the outside world, you're absolutely right. We have some competition. I think we would say there's probably only one or two companies globally that do really what we do, which is redefine the entire car to, I'll use the term concourse standard. It's not concourse because the original engine is no longer there, but to a standard that is so high that it's better than original, better than new. So there's very few companies that do that. There are people that convert cars, and that's an entirely different space. We redefine the whole car. We take it right back to the chassis. The chassis is treated, selected. It's better than new, and then we build it up as an EV. So there's very few companies that do that. But my view on competition actually is that even those that do similar to us are actually doing different vehicles. So by the way, they might buy one of theirs and one of ours, which is great. Secondly, I think a rising tide floats all boats. So in other words, if there's more and more people talking about what we do, that's good. That's a good thing, right? And I don't think we've ever had a scenario, actually thinking about it, with a client that was even considering talking to anybody else. So now there might be people that assume one thing, which is, okay, these cars are going to cost X, because they've seen what a conversion costs, and it is very, very different. We've got thousands of hours of engineering and even paint, 3,000 hours worth of paint on some of our vehicles. So it's a big thing in terms of what we do. There are people that don't get that, and that's fine. It's the same thing if you don't know your watches and want to go and buy a Patek, but you end up with a Swatch, right? It's a different kind of market. But outside of those individuals that probably haven't necessarily understood what we do and therefore what it's going to cost, we don't really see any competition at the moment in that side of things. And when it comes to our B2B market, again, we're kind of paving a market that doesn't really exist today. So again, we've been very fortunate the way we've positioned ourselves. our B2B marketing, and what that is, by the way, is where we're developing full turnkey powertrains for new vehicles, whether they are sports cars, supercars, with lots of opportunities in defense and marine, where again, companies that need to build a new product, get it to market quickly, they don't want to go and hire 20 EV engineers. They need to rely on somebody else to do that. We're then, working with a number of companies in that.
So those that maybe don't know fully what that would be,
yeah,
the B2B product that you have,
yeah,
just explain it in maybe a simple terms.
Yeah. So really, I guess what we are taking best. So let's say you're a chef, taking best in class ingredients essentially, and you're creating a dish. Now, somebody might want a slightly different dish, so they don't want the powertrain we built for our GT40. They want it maybe slightly more refined for a sports car or a supercar.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the best in class components, and we bring all those together for what it's worth. Within our software environment, we can then tune that. We can do drive modes. We can do all the things that you would expect of an EV. That if you are starting from scratch, will take you probably years to develop yourself. We've done all that for our own cars, and then we're selling that as a service. That service, I suppose I'm going to use another metaphor. If you go to Savile Row and you want an entirely bespoke suit, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you want a made to measure, i.e. it's something that's already kind of existing and you just want it tailored to you, that's kind of what we're doing. So we've built very high performance powertrains. We built mid performance and lower performance in different shapes and sizes. People come to us and say, actually, I want to build a next gen sports car, supercar, wherever it might be. I want one like that. I want an 800 horsepower, 800 newton meters of torque, 800 volt system. That's our GT40. Now, you might want a slightly different shape and size, but we can develop that very, very rapidly for them.
How have you managed to do that so quickly?
That's a very good question, because it's happened so much quicker than we
expected. 7 years in now, and you managed to do that.
Honestly, it's been so. The crazy thing is, we've not. Well, how can I put this? We always knew there was going to be an opportunity there,
right?
And the reason for that is that you just look at the way the world goes, and actually, like my experience in the kind of financial services or the kind of fintech world, the more innovation happens, the more you have the opportunity to then, punch above your weight, quite frankly. But what's been really incredible is our B2C operations have been what's driven our B2B market. In other words, we've done zero marketing in B2B, and yet we've now got nearly $500 million worth of opportunity in our B2B. $500 million worth of opportunity in our B2B market. So it's crazy. Now, not all of those will come to fruition. But the crazy thing is, it's been on zero marketing dollars, because we've even had a client on B2B where they're building a next-gen supercar. The guy saw a reel of our GT40 doing donuts on our test track, and I want some of that, basically.
That's how you found it?
Yeah.
And you're basically saying, without your B2C business, B2B wouldn't exist?
That's right. Exactly. It's our proof point. It's our... we've got clients, generally we've got clients that use our cars every single day. So we've got thousands and thousands of miles of data. We do data logging. We don't currently do over the air updates, but we've got so much, almost we're a mini OEM from that perspective. And all of my team are used to working in OEM environments. So they're used to, everything has build books. Everything is professionally done. We are very much, if someone came in to view us again, it's like a mini OEM. So what that means is then when we're talking to people that want the same, we talk their same language. But the point is that, again, because we've got so many cars on the road, we built a brand that people respect and love. People then come in to us and say, I just need some of that. Give me some of that. We want to be, we want to be part of what you're doing. And by the way, we can get them, therefore, and because of our proof points, we might be able to get their vehicle program testing and on the road within 12 months that might have taken them 3 years. And that's the real value add.
I think you said earlier, it's obviously about team massively, but to be able to do the operation you have is even bigger than I thought it was. Like, obviously knowing the brand and researching before their show, but like it's way bigger in complexity than I even imagined. Is it just purely down to the right people?
Yes.
Because you also haven't raised that much capital. So like in my mind, I'm trying to work out, how you're managing to basically 4 or 5 times X the speed it would normally take in the way that you're doing it. I can understand the B2C connection and that element, but like, everything you're doing from operations to marketing to brand to technical to software, like the whole picture for a brand that's been around for 7 years. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
People.
Look, it's always all about the people, quite frankly. You know, you can have the best ideas in the world, but if you haven't got the people around you to help and deliver, and it's all about not only people, but teamwork. You know, it's about having that joined up approach. And being honest, it's about being right place at the right time. You know, if we'd have tried to do this even 4 or 5 years before we did, you know, it would be in a different story, I'm sure, because again, people's openness to what we do is changed, and therefore that allows us to create some amazing cars that are getting fantastic coverage. You know, we're about to deliver another car to a very wealthy individual in San Francisco. Again, that car will be seen in the Bay Area by all the right people. And you look at, we sometimes forget how much money and influence there is in California, but also a willingness for people to succeed as well. And again, it's a fantastic environment. So, you know, we as a business are at the moment expanding to set up a base in California. So I think from a small company, that's been incredible. But to your point, you know, A, you can't do it without the people. B, you need luck. Now you can say you can make your own luck, but actually, which is entirely true, by the way, but actually, you just have to, if you have that belief and you have the right people behind you and around you, pretty much anything is possible. Sometimes, as I say, you have to pivot, and sometimes you have to pivot a lot. But actually, if that core vision is right, and again, you just have some luck and the right people around you.
Incredible. How much development time really goes into these projects from a team side?
Yeah,
it must be extortion, man.
Yeah, it really is significant. So we were talking earlier about a project that we're looking at for a client, which is one of our bespoke programs. So it's a private office bespoke program where a gentleman came to us and said, would you build the world's first Lamborghini LM002 as an EV?
For those who don't know the significance of that car, like just for non-car people, could you try and explain that?
Yeah, it was essentially, it was built as a military vehicle first and foremost, as a kind of an architecture. Lamborghini then picked this up, and essentially it was a Middle Eastern family that wanted to create these into kind of cool off-roaders, essentially. And it was then known as the Rambo Lambo because Sylvester Stallone famously had one, but it basically used the same as the Countach engine, so big, huge lump in the vehicle. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually drive like you'd expect because it is a really quite heavy vehicle. It's challenging. It's challenging. You've got to love it and really want to drive it. But it's iconic, right? And again, if you go and look at LM002, you'll see why it's arguably it's got a face a mother you would love rather than anything else. But it is iconic.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've done a full study on that vehicle. So again, when we say we're going to do a vehicle, we take it all the way back to the bare bones. Everything is 3D scanned, everything is weighed, everything is catalogued.
That literally piece by piece?
Piece by piece, absolutely. You keep the chassis intact to the body on, but everything else and everything that can come off it comes off it. So we know the shape and size of pretty much every item. We have 5.2 billion data points on that car, which is billion, which is quite a lot. So we've got a full 3D model. And then when it comes to developing an EV powertrain for that, we have we talked before, best in class motors, batteries, power electronics. So not only can we, determine what weight we can play with. So we took 1.1 metric tons of combustion engine stuff. So engine, gearbox, transmission, fuel tanks out of that vehicle. Clearly, we now have a 3D space that we can package. And by the way, 1.1 tons of battery and motor is quite a lot to replace, which is fantastic. So we can, and we've got designs for up to a megawatt of power in that vehicle now.
A megawatt,
which is again quite a lot.
And technically, how could you compare that to what?
So it's like almost. I mean, if you look at
what's in a Taycan.
Taycan is, good grief, I'd need to. I'm mixing my drinks, but if you look at something like a Rimac Nevera, that really, really ultra high performance is kind of edging towards that. It's not that exact thing. But my point is, the interesting thing is, because of the technology we can have access to, we do have, motorsport grade batteries. We do have a motor set that is derived, and in Formula E cars. We have the power electronics and the inverters that are in, again, some of the biggest, the best known hypercars. So actually, arguably, we kind of shrinking down some of the things that are in a Navera into a package of an LM002. Whether we end up building it, because he's in the UAE and there's challenges there at the moment. But I think the point is, that's the level of detail that we go to, and that's when you think of the thousands of hours of engineering, therefore, that go into it. But what comes out of it, of course, is something that we can be hugely proud of. And once people see those on the road, somebody else will want one, and that's the cool thing about what we do.
It's always an investment from your side as well, in that perspective.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge with developing that kind of product? Like, in terms of, is it knowing how far to go? Is it just standardized challenges around, what you're replacing, what you're changing? Is there a common challenge that comes up with that kind of development?
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of things. Obviously, we are, generally speaking, the LM002 is a bit different, but generally speaking, we're working in fairly compact spaces. These are not vehicles that were designed for batteries. They're not designed for, so yes, there might have been a biggish engine in one or two of them, but they're not, they weren't designed as a skateboard chassis, for example, like a modern EV would be. So space is always a premium. Our ethos is that we don't cut the chassis or the body. So again, we've got to make sure we're working within the constraints of the.
You don't cut it at all?
No. I mean, there are areas you might have to cut a tiny hole for a cable, but outside of that, it's our whole ethos is the car is the star. It's the most important thing. And even though we're changing the powertrain and the heart, we want it to look as good as
and skeletons.
Yeah, exactly right. The other key principles for us is it must never weigh more than, certainly than the gross vehicle weight that it did before, but ideally way below that. So our Porsches actually weigh about 20 kilos less than a 964 turbo.
Why is that?
Because we use a load of composite, so the body panels in the main are all replaced with carbon.
Right. But why do you never want it to weigh more?
Because EVs obviously have a bit of a negative story around weight, being heavier than others.
Yeah.
Part of our engineering is trying to make sure they're actually lighter, and therefore we kind of knock down the head straight away.
Yeah.
Obviously, you lose some range on that, but actually, our view is, you'd rather have the car feeling as it did before than being dragged down by extra weight. And yes, you can manage things through suspension and various other things, but actually, if you can create a car, I mean, the 964 is a prime example. That's about 60% more powerful than a 964 turbo, but lighter.
Yours is?
Yeah. So
60% more powerful.
More powerful. Now, you can imagine this, therefore, a load of fun.
Yeah.
So what you don't want to do is lose the fun element of why people wanted these things in the first place. Our Pagoda is just a work of art, and actually, but you can do nearly 250 miles in that thing. So it's kind of again, the engineering involved in doing that is quite significant.
Yeah.
Key things are we don't cut the chassis, and we try to keep it below weight distribution, and center of gravity. We was again trying to manage to being as close as possible to original, if not better. So again, these are all engineering challenges that are way more than most people would even consider doing. But the output is we get journalists in our cars and they absolutely love them, and that's the great thing. Johnny Lieberman, as you may know, is quite a character. He and I were on the Angeles Crest Highway, rolling down that at breakneck speed, and he said, afterwards, he said, "This is the best 964 I've ever touched." And that for us, as a small company, is wonderful feedback, as you can imagine.
How does it feel for you?
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, if you read, so there's a few things that are just make me so proud. So first and foremost, our team, who are just so committed and love what they do. Things like journalist feedback is incredible. We've got one client who, this is another thing, one client who lives principally in Singapore, but has his car, one of our Land Rovers in his home in Switzerland. Every winter, he'll send me a picture of that car, a beautiful background. One year he sent, with his son in front of the car, just loving it. He, for example, openly says it's the only car that will get up his driveway to his home in Switzerland in their conditions. Right through to other clients will just send me a text now and again saying I'm loving this. And again, that whole kind of, we do it for a reason. We do it to delight people, and actually when they are delighted, it's a really good feeling.
Massively.
Yeah.
And the satisfaction for you with, the countless hours you put in, so the sacrifice as well.
That's right.
You put into it must make it all worth it.
Completely. Yeah, it really does. And again, I can genuinely see such a huge opportunity ahead of us. I don't think there's many companies of our age and size that have that much opportunity ahead of them at this point in time that aren't AI or, or a SaaS business, quite frankly. So we're in a really interesting space. I think, I talked earlier about, the EV winter, I think, is kind of coming to a thaw because the global energy crisis, because people are getting more used to the fact that actually, those who didn't even look at an EV are starting to look at an EV. New vehicle programs are now, a lot of them are EV first rather than EV last or second or third.
Yeah.
So that from that perspective, that's really exciting. And as I say, we're seeing opportunities in other spaces as well, whether it's commercial vehicles, whether it's marine, whether it's defense. Again, they all need high-end sort of powertrain provision.
Yeah.
And of course, again, for a small company, that's super exciting getting involved in some of those projects as well.
Your LinkedIn speaks a lot about the industry. What do you think is maybe wrong in public perception about the EV industry?
So I think there's a number of things. I think that unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation, definitely. And without being too direct, there's a lot, the billions of pounds spent by oil companies for EV not to happen, is absolutely insane. And
in what sense are they doing that?
They're just misinformation.
Right.
And that clearly, if you're a somebody that listens to that, and by the way, I don't blame them, because if they're being pushed that all the time, then they're going to believe it. And not everybody wants to look underneath the surface at the reality. So that's one thing. I think, unfortunately, Western governments haven't helped. They've tried to force things, and now they've pulled back, and now they're absolutely. And I think the problem is then, let's be perfectly honest, Western manufacturers have lost tens of billions as a result, because it hasn't been clear. We're not saying, by the way, EV is the only option. It's an eclectic. It will, powertrains will either be, there'll still be combustion, in the same way there's still horses on the road, by the way. There will be EREV, so electric range extender vehicles where the power is still electric, but maybe there's a power generator. Clearly hybrid is there. The challenge with hybrid for me still is that you're carrying around a dud powertrain most of the time. I was in a car yesterday doing a 150-mile journey. It was in a hybrid. It was an Uber. He openly said, it's pointless having the two, because
you're in an Uber for 150 miles.
Which is slightly boring. There and back 150 miles. So Oxfordshire and back. But he was saying that, can I say how much do you use the EV? And he said, well, unfortunately, probably 10% of the time in and out of let's say into London. My wife had a Range Rover, one of the very first Range Rover hybrids. Again, at that point it was only doing 20 odd miles as an EV. You're then carrying, you've even got a 4-cylinder engine in a Range Rover that's carrying around a load of weight. So it just doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And of course, most people don't charge their hybrids. So actually, it's just a complete waste of time. But for certain use cases, you have to, right? And we're not unrealistic. EVs still aren't, in mass market terms, still can't do 500, 600 miles. Now, do they really need to? Not really. I don't know many people that do 600 miles a day, right? But for the odd journey, to drive up to Edinburgh or down to John O'Groats or whatever, it's kind of a misnomer. People will buy a car for that one journey a year, and that's the crazy thing still. But the reality is the technology is moving on so fast. So to your point, what's the issue? So I think it's a combination of things. I think, as I said before, misinformation by big oil companies has not helped. I think, unfortunately, governments are swayed by those. Yeah. But we're not saying EV is the only answer. We're saying it's a very strong solution. because also we're looking at EREV as a market. And
Can you explain?
so EREV is basically where the driven wheels are still electric,
right?
But it's topping up the battery. So it's using a small combustion engine that's creating it's basically a generator,
Right.
charging batteries and then driving.
Still fuel that as normal.
Exactly.
But you're also charging the car.
That's right. Exactly right. So that we think is quite an interesting space. And then if you look at just pure play battery technology, we certainly are working on a couple of programs now that will likely end up being solid state or semi-solid state batteries. And genuinely that is a game changer. I mean, it's been coming for been talked about for decade. Well, it's only a decade now. But some of that's coming to reality now. And that is a game changer. It's almost doubling the power density. Therefore, you can either massively reduce the weight of the battery, or if you have the same battery, you're doing almost double the range, or certainly 50% plus range. That's going to be a big game changer. And there are cars now that will do over 1,000 kilometers, as an EV. They're just not all there yet. But I think, again, range is, I personally do 20,000 miles a year in an EV. I've done, I think I'm right saying 80,000 miles in 4 years in EVs. And I've charged 8 times because I plug it in when I get home. So I've only ever had to charge away from home 8 times in about 80,000 miles.
What's actually going there? I thought
pretty big one. No, but my point is, my use case is I do less than 200 miles in a day. Even on a long day, I'll do less than 200 miles. So I've always got enough charge. I get home and by 4 a.m. it's charged again, so I don't have to worry about it. I know that's not everybody is in that scenario, but I think a lot of people probably are.
Do you think the industry was kind of running before it was walking in terms of the EV industry?
I think
2014, 2015-esque time. So I think it was everywhere, and then lots of negative came out about it. And then it was kind of like a work back, and then governments are involved and bigger OEMs are. It's just, it was all very, feels like it's been up and down for the last 10, 15
years. It has. And I think there's a combination of things. I think there's, again, not enough Western OEMs jumped on this quick enough, whereas the Chinese absolutely have. And if you ever get bored and have a look on Instagram at some of the Chinese vehicles that come through, it is just insane. The rate of innovation, the fact that they built companies that are entirely vertically integrated. So the same companies building the battery, the motor, the power electronics, they literally are vertically integrated. And don't be wrong, they've had a lot of Chinese government support to achieve that. Yeah. But they're going to.
But you need for an industry.
They're going to take over the world when it comes to certainly the mass market vehicles. And that's what worries me now, is that there are some really cool European brands that won't make it.
They won't
make it.
You're talking about smaller brands?
No, very, very big ones. Yeah, because genuinely speaking, if you look at, people have a very narrow view sometimes, and they'll look at, let's say, the UK market, and they'll say Mercedes, BMW, Stellantis, some of the other products, they'll see what's in front of them. And they still see thousands of these on the road, and that's brilliant. And, the anti-EV in people say, I'll always drive a combustion car. The bigger picture, however, is those brands used to be selling tons of cars in Latin America, tons of cars in South, in parts of the world that we don't necessarily see. That's all being replaced by Chinese EVs right now.
That's happening.
Yeah, that's happening. And that's the challenge, which is the volume is no longer there. People talk about Porsche and the fact that they've lost billions over the last few years and blaming it all on EV. EV is some of it, but actually the Chinese market dropped from being one of their biggest markets to being now one of their smallest, because Chinese innovation has been able to recreate the likes of a Taycan, and you can buy them for a third of the price in China. And the Chinese are less worried now about brands. They're actually quite, back in the day, they would have, Porsche, I've got to have a Porsche. Yeah. Now they're very, very supportive of local brands. And so again, lots of different moving parts, but my worry is that some of the Western brands have left it too late, and they're pushing back on regulation because, let's be honest, they have to. They're in a no-win situation. If you're a German OEM and you've got thousands of combustion engineers in your employment, you can't get rid of them because the employment laws are pretty tight. So you kind of, it's unfortunately, it's a position where they're in a no-win position, or no-win situation. So that does concern me. I have friends at some of these places, and they're equally worried.
Yeah. Sustainable fuels if that happens on a mass scale, do you think that changes anything?
To a point. Again, I'd say it's an eclectic mix of different options. The challenge, I think, with sustainable fuels, in the main, a lot of it's down to, they're not purely synthetic. There is a crop that's being grown. There's a lot of energy that goes into creating sustainable fuels still.
Yeah.
Two challenges of that. First of all, the energy, you might as well put in a battery and put it in a car. In other words, you're using a lot more energy per mile than you would have just putting it straight into a battery. And secondly, distribution of all that fuel. Again, the global oil system works. If all of a sudden you've got to put, different entry points into the system, it's quite challenging. Or do you just go to Halfords and buy fuel? I'm not sure you're going to do that. And then last but not least, it's still emitting. It's not clean. It might be cleaner on the way in, and the argument will always be, but we're growing crops to offset the fact that it's putting out CO2.
Yeah,
but it's still emitting. It's still not. And there is no perfect solution. There is still energy being used to build the batteries in the first place. But at least once they're built, it's a very happy process. And it's been proven, even if energy is entirely coal-fired to charge a battery, it's still cleaner than using a combustion car. Yeah. So again, but there's a lot of misinformation out there from people that don't.
It does just feel like that. It just feels like, and it's obviously an industry that affects everyone. That's in most countries, it's showing that, and also affects multiple industries indirectly as well in those elements. So it's just like it feels very messy.
Yeah.
But it also feels like with Everrati, what you guys are doing is operating in a certain part of that market, and actually you probably don't have to worry about the EV hating as much.
We don't. No, we generally don't. In fact, arguably, it's working. See from the side, the kind of clients we have are fairly anti kind of almost establishment in some ways. They want to be seen as different. They want to, there's a big thing in the US, drill baby drill and use more and more hydrocarbons. Actually, a lot of our clients are like, they're brilliant because we can be seen as different. We can be seen as people that are kind of almost going, not going against it, but we have our own opinion and we're going to demonstrate in what we drive. The really exciting thing for us is because we're doing halo cars, niche cars that actually, genuinely, I believe, and this is the really interesting thing. When an EV can be as fun, let's say, as a GT3 through a canyon pass in northern or southern California, is when the argument is actually lost in many ways, and that's really not far away now. That is so close. With lightweighting, with battery technology, out and out performance is everyone's proven EVs can be far more performant. But actually, when you can create an EV that's as fun as a Blatt on a Sunday morning in your favorite car on your favorite mountain pass, that's actually not too far away now. And yes, people will miss sound, and yes, people will do other things, but if you look at what BMW are doing, if you look at what Hyundai have done on the 5N, which is again pumping fake sound back in, but a lot of combustion cars already have fake sound anyway. So you kind of what's the argument against it? I'm not a huge fan, but I think there's great opportunity to increase engagement in EVs, and that's what people want. They want, if you don't want to be driven, and I spend a lot of time in California, and the freeway's full of Tesla full self-drive, people just sat there working. For that use case, it's great. Driving into LA, why would you want to be actually driving? But if you want to then go on a Sunday blast or whatever it might be, that's when you want something that's a load of fun. And I think we're not too far away from doing that in some of these products that are being developed right now.
Insane. So for Everrati, what you mentioned earlier that it's grown and got bigger than you thought it would ever be. On the B2C side of things, are the plans big?
Yes, absolutely. They are big, but actually we want to keep it refined. And what I mean by that is, we don't. It's certainly never going to be mass market for obvious reasons, right? Our cars are between just shy of £300,000 up to £600,000-700,000 so they're not for everybody by definition. But we see other vehicles in the pipeline, which I can't really talk about now, but we get some weird and wonderful requests, as you can imagine, but some of them are really worth listening to. So we've got a client at the moment who is he's in and around Hollywood. He wanted a certain car. yeah, he wants that to be his legacy. He wants to redefine and recreate a really, really cool car.
Yeah.
We'll do that then as a low volume series of vehicles. And this is, again, if you've got the wherewithal, the ambition, the vision, and let's be honest, some money,
Yeah.
we can do some really, really cool stuff for people, and that becomes their legacy. So that's really exciting. But, you know, and I think what Singer Vehicle Design have proved is that there is a really interesting space at this low volume, halo, high value vehicle market. Clearly their combustion, we're EV, but actually the kind of ethos is very, very similar.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be building too many cars, obviously, but actually we want to continue to surprise and delight people, and you know, when they see them and drive them, see the smile on their face. And
how many cars are you making a year?
It's still low numbers.
Yeah.
You know, at any one point in time, I think right now we've got 9 cars in build as an example. You know, we don't build them all in the same place. So we have a Stuttgart partner for our Mercedes. We have a Land Rover builder here in the UK, and Porsche. We actually split UK and California just because we've got, you know, it's easier from a client perspective. And we'll probably continue to grow that out. So we've got a couple of conversations around potentially a BMW right now. But it means that we're quite asset light. So we do all the design, we do all the, you know, the sort of colors, materials, and finishes. You know, we work with clients to choose and develop, and then we have third parties, but the best builders, frankly, in their own area, to build those with us as well.
And do you think if you're doing 9 currently, where do you think that production level will go to?
So I think we will be very happy to get to say 100, 150 cars a year. We're not there yet.
Okay.
But when you consider that these are very bespoke, you know, vehicles, you know, we're not, you know, every single one is unique. You know, our CMF lady, so colors, materials, and finishes, she actually was at Aston Martin. She pretty much every Valkyrie on the road was spec'd by her with each individual client. So when you've got people like that on the team that can just, you know, they'll look at a plant and say, right, what element of that do you like? Is it the color? Is it the feel of the leaf? Is it something else? How do we build that into your spec of your car? There's so much you can do. There's so many cool fabrics coming through that wouldn't typically be used in automotive, but again, you can start to think about that.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. You know, we've just done a commission with a castle in Scotland, for example, and again, it's using their tweed. It's using elements of a special part of the castle that's no longer there in the car. Yeah, and again, just entirely bespoke and one-off pieces, which is it's great to do and great to see people's faces when they end up getting them handed over.
Insane. Well, final question for me is, what does it take to build a brand like Everrati?
Good grief. It's vision, it's people, it's hard work, and it's just people being committed to what you do. You've got to, I think, I said you make your own luck, but it's so true in this space. Given that most of my team are engineers, they're not used to building a brand. Most of my career has not been B2C, it's been B2B, so actually not been building a brand. I'm just one of these people, I suppose, that has always loved brands. You know, I see value in brand, I see the brand story. And again, that's exactly what we're trying to do, which is, it's about building a story. You know, it's creating EVs out of cars that people already love. Everrati, you may know, it's ever, keeping great cars on the road forever. Rati is the goddess of love, passion, and desire, which is what we all have for our cars. So it's kind of building that story, getting that into people's consciousness. So what it takes is it's real commitment, real drive, love of what you do. Because if you didn't love it, this really wouldn't happen. So that's
until you absolutely love it. And the story's been amazing, and thank you for coming on the show. And just, I think the innovation is incredible that you guys are doing, and obviously the product is stunning and is a work of art, but I think the innovation behind it is just fascinating that you guys are building that, and in the speed that you have is ridiculous. So I'm interested to see where you'll be in 7 years time, because who knows at this point. But thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure.